Welcome back, everyone. Today we're handling the Clone Wars Legion box set. Man, this was a lot of fun. I saw this game when I very first got into the hobby. Really glad that I finally got to tackle it. Not so glad about these clone models with the material that they're made out of, because some parts you can file, some parts you can use your knife. Not everything really works that well. I ended up getting these extra heads from Darkfire Designs. They got some really brilliant 3D printed stuff. I'll put the link in the description below. And speaking of customization, I wanted to be able to change out the Bark sidecar rider, so threw on some magnets with it, just to give a little bit of versatility and, be a little bit extra as per usual. Always be careful with power tools, especially when it's in your bare hands. These are just 3mm magnets. And then the bases, everything I'd seen, this is a wide galaxy full of all kinds of craziness, so I wanted to do something a little crazy, something to stand out a little bit. So some golden crackle paste, threw in some paint. It seemed to dry a lot quicker once the paint was mixed in versus by itself. So I just dry brushed some turquoise on top of the fluorescent pink. I did get myself a super duper cheap $100 airbrush, completely worth it. I did a basic zenithal and use a panel liner just to try something different for the black parts, and ended up working really well. And I probably could have called it there, honestly, but I threw in some oil paints just to brighten those whites up quite a bit, because this really didn't take too long at all throwing this on. But like I said, the zenithal probably could have passed it off by itself. This is my custom group, the 423rd Irregulars. Purple is their accent color, and I did give every single character individual markings because I've been watching Clone Wars, and the idea of clones having these individual personalities and customizing their armor dependent on those personalities really drew me in. That's one of the reasons why the clones are probably going to be my main faction. I like all the other ones for different reasons, but the clones doing that, just, I don't know, something about it really appealed. And then highlighting, I threw in some Bastion Gray to kind of desaturate it. I didn't want to real vibrant purple. I wanted something a little more muted. I did come in and do a little bit of chipping with some pure white, just to show some battle damage that these clones have been through quite a bit. And I did add some straight oil purple onto it, as well as another additional highlight, just to pick out the absolute brightest spots. These are Gamer Graphs Tufts. This is actually what inspired this paint job. And then I did an undercoat of a real thin Warlock purple to give an atmospheric highlight. And then pigment powders of this turquoise to show the dust that was getting kicked up and the dirt and everything. One squad got black, one squad got gray. That's how I'm gonna differentiate between them. And this is the character I was most excited to build. Obi-Wan is probably, and has always probably been, my favorite character in the Star Wars universe. I wanted to give him a little extra oomph, and the pose that they have him in, while visually is interesting, he never does anything in that stance. So I wanted to give him something a little more practical, a little more dynamic. So I moved his arm, and I ended up cutting off his other hand with his two fingers sticking out, and 3D printed just a general reaching out hand. And then I did his skin in a very washed out olive green. Gives it a real richness once you put the skin tones on top of it. It took 2 base coats of the real thin skin color, and then did a highlight on top of it, of course. And since he was a hero unit, I put a bit more effort into him than your typical trooper, everything. And then the eyes. One eye, of course, was absolutely perfect. And then the other eye I had to redo 4 times. But in the end, they ended up looking pretty good. And I got to move on to the rest of him. You know, I did the Marco Frazzoni method and all of this. I based in acrylics and then highlighted in oils. This is my favorite, kind of weathered cloth or paper kind of look, which is necrotic flesh. And then highlighting up. I got the oil paints and mixed them to a bone color, which I generally use as a highlight on top of necrotic flesh, and it looks really, really good. And then just kind of stippled the oil so it kind of still had that textury look to it. It wasn't too smooth, and did the same thing with the belt. Then on to the droids. Thank goodness for sprues. But I just want to know, after I cleaned all this stuff up and started assembling, the person that made this, who hurt you? What happened? The heads and the fiddly bits on the droids. I mean, I know they're small and everything, but good grief, assembling these things was... But I went through, zenithal these as well, and then came in with that Bastion Gray that I kind of mixed in with the purple on the clones. So they vaguely tied together, and that was my base on this. I didn't want to go with that general color that you see on a lot of the droids. I wanted something just a little bit different. Whole Red and Bastion Gray was the base colors for these. Whole Red is a awesome base color. I got it specifically for this. It's from Vallejo. And if you're enjoying this, go check out some of the other people that also have been painting up some Star Wars stuff this month. Realm of the Lich, the Bear the Brush, Yoshi's Painting, and the Basic Brush. Their links for their channels are going to be down in the description. And these guys, I spent more time on them than I probably should have, but I wanted them to look, individualized as a unit instead of each one. So each one got this exact same paint scheme. Then came in and started highlighting. This was a mix of Whole Red and Vermilion. And then this is Ash Gray. And I did come in and make it look chipped and everything. I didn't just edge highlight. And then these all got oil washes. It's a mix of yellow ochre and burnt umber. So it's a little browny yellow kind of color. And then just barely wiped it off. And then this got panel lining pretty much only on the head and neck. And I kind of waffled about the bases on these. And I decided to go desert, but I didn't want to go Tatooine or Jeddah or anything, any place you'd really seen. But I had just watched the Void episode of Clone Wars with the white sand. So that's what really kind of drove this color scheme. And I didn't want to do just a sand base, so I added in those rocks. And then I did a white oil wash onto this. And then a white dry brush. So you still had that depth of color. So it wasn't just monotone white all the way through. But of course, the rocks got dry brushed as well. So I came in with a blue and black wash. Did that on all the rocks. And then just kind of came in and did a few little accent pieces here and there where you'd see a lot of weathering. Then I started pulling these guys off the bases. I still had the Droidicas to go. They did not want to stick on the base. I probably re-glued each of these like 3 times. And then they got weathering powder as well, just pure white to reflect the sand coming up on them. The Droidicas got the exact same paint scheme. They're a little rusty. I didn't show that, but that was just done with some Rhinox hide. Just a little detail to show off on them a little bit. And I really enjoyed doing these larger armor panels. This was kind of inspired by bill making stuff and scratch bashing and everything, where when they do rusty material, they don't paint all the way up to the edge. So I just kind of dabbed in large swaths and then highlighted with the gray. So it looked like these guys had seen quite a bit of battle. And it turned out looking really good. Grievous. I waffled pretty hard on how I wanted to present him. I was originally going to magnetize, but I couldn't get any 1mm magnets quick enough to do the arms, which I may go back and do later, but I decided to do the 50-50 with his annihilator and the lightsabers. And this was kind of the same way I did Obi-Wan's robes. I based it in necrotic flesh and then came in, did that kind of bone mixture. I went a little more on the yellow with him, just based on his, generic color scheme and everything. And I love doing oils for metal. It just works so well. Just a little touch of white and just feather it out. And then the lightsabers were a lot of fun to figure out. Did whatever color as the bottom for the base for the most intense light, and then just did white oil paint on the end and just kind of moved it down and it blended beautifully. Did a tiny bit of OSL, not a whole lot, not real intense. And then terrain, I 3D printed a whole bunch of stuff. I got more in the works, but the fan went out on my printer, so I'm having to take a break for that. The theme for the board I wanted to do was something I hadn't seen a whole lot of, which is a junkyard, and this was mostly inspired by Season 2 of The Mandalorian. All of these files are free on Thingiverse. I'll put a link in the description below. I did modify a few of them, and then did oil washes on everything. This is just a black general oil wash, did on the barracks. And then I wanted to make everything a little rusty, so Luke Towen at Luke's APS did this video, Geek Gaming Scenics, recently. This is brown paint, a whole lot of sand, a little bit of medium. Glopped it on, thinned it out a little bit with brush, kind of moved everything around, and then came in with some rust paint. This is the effects paint from Army Painter. Looks great. The more you build it up, the more variation you get, the more intensity. Yeah, use your fingers on stuff. It's not gonna hurt it. And then weathering powder. Always weathering powder. It just ties everything together really well. Gives mood almost. And of course had to paint all of my range rulers. Didn't have to, but kind of did. And then this mat, I used the same. I used this from a tutorial from Narb Makes and Terrain Tutors. Just bought a big giant sheet of generic canvas, acrylic caulk, and then painted it. And then I wanted to give a little more detail, a little character to it, so I just sketched out a couple of little rocks or whatever to give it some more interest, one more personality. It was a trial. I'll be doing some more. First time after I was done putting everything together on the board, and I'm new to wargaming. I am going to be doing some battle reports. I had so much fun putting all of this together, and my next video is actually going to be a battle report of a skirmish of the forces you get in the box set. So if that sounds interesting to you, then Appease the Small Gods of the Algorithm, come and check me out next time. Thank you so much.